Hey guys, Miss Riggs here. And during this video, we're going to talk about populations and how they change in size and what factors determine what size a population might be. So what is a population? So we've discussed in class that a population is basically all of the members in a species that are living in the same place at the same time. So these members can reach each other to reproduce. So remember, the difference between a species and a population is a species can be spread out through different ecosystems, whereas a population is a combination of the same species in one place at one time. So they are able to reproduce within their population. So what are some different properties of a population? Remember, we have three different population dispersions. We have a clumped population, and these are more social populations, and they clump together to form a social group. A lot of times these are organisms that might be grazers, and they might it might be beneficial for them to clump together into a group in order to survive. Then we have uniform dispersion, and this is where organisms are kind of dispersed uniformly, and this can be like a group of penguins who is in a uniform front. In order to survive, they clump together in this uniform group, and they kind of trade spots in order to stay warm and to survive. This can also be like desert plants because there's not enough resources for them to be close together. So in order to survive, they have to spread out into this uniform dispersion. And then there's random. And so random might be some sort of organism that might be territorial. It might have seeds that kind of float through the wind. It might have spores like a fern. And these are kind of randomly dispersed because they kind of fall wherever they are their seeds are blown to. So how does a population grow? So a change in population equals births minus death. And this might seem pretty easy to understand, but actually it is definitely relied on some other factors. So over time, the growth rates of populations change because of birth rates and death rates increase or decrease. But there are also other factors involved that keep a population at a stable place. For a population growth rate to be 0, the average number of births must equal the average number of deaths. And a population would remain the same if each pair of adults produced exactly 2 offspring. And each of these offspring survive to reproduction. So we know that this isn't really the case, and we'll talk about what these limiting factors are throughout this video. So how fast can a population grow? So this graph right here represents an exponential growth, and if the population growth factor were true and there weren't any external factors, then this would generally be exponential growth. But we know that this isn't true, so that it'll eventually even out, and we'll talk about how it evens out. But it's important to note that species reproduce at different rates. So smaller organisms have short generation times, which means that they are younger when they are able to reproduce, but they also a lot of times produce a lot of young because they that's their survival mechanism, is to produce a lot of young, knowing that most of them will die before they're able to reproduce again. Larger organisms produce a smaller amount of offspring because they are able to survive easier. But then these larger organisms also take longer to reproduce. So what are some limiting factors in population growth? So we have this exponential growth here, line A. And in general, besides humans, which will eventually have a carrying capacity, but in general, a population can only grow to their carrying capacity or to where they have the maximum resource limits. So this carrying capacity is determined by different biological factors like how much food is available. So if we have a predator-prey relationship and we have a lot of predators growing, then our prey would be going down. As our prey goes down, our predators start to die and our predator count goes down. So then that enables the prey to start to grow and the cycle continues. So it's not really a straight line, it's very much fluctuating, but in general that carrying capacity stays around this mark. So that can be determined from food, that can be determined by water, maybe habitat where they're living, maybe predation or competition. All of those things can influence carrying capacity. So there are two types of population regulation. We have density-dependent regulation and density-independent regulation. So density-dependent regulation is going to depend on the density of the population. So if you have a high population, then the carrying capacity can't hold that population. There is going to either be a resource that's going to be scarce. They're not going to have enough room, enough living space. They're going to spread disease. Those are all density-dependent relationships. Density-independent factors are things like natural disasters, where it doesn't matter how much density is in a population. If they're going to die from a natural disaster, they're going to die anyway, not depending on the density of that population. So these are usually fires or natural disasters, tornadoes, hurricanes, earthquakes, things like that. So that is all I have for this video. Please be sure to fill out your note outline. If you make it through this whole video, go ahead and write your name on the board as you come into class, and I will distribute 15 extra credit points between everybody who comes in and writes their name on the board. This is just a fun way to see who reached the end of the video. Don't tell your friends because you'll share those points amongst everybody that writes their name on the board. So thank you for watching, and don't forget you can always rewind and watch this again.